on traditional HPC. Okay, true. So this is has been a hallmark of the VSC as of the beginning. It's focused a lot on computing, which means we're thinking about a tier one like system, tier one computing system. So this is like the very beginning of the VSC. The focus has been on this guy. And a couple of years ago, we broadened that scope and also included tier one cloud and tier one data in that. What was the purpose of that? Opening up the horizon. Everyone knows that data is more important than ever. So storage capacity, data management, that's what the tier one data offers, and someone else will tell you more about that in more detail. Tier one cloud is focused on flexibility towards you as a user. And I want to briefly highlight a couple of things that sort of mix in between. So the web portal, based on OnDemand, Jan will also tell you more about that, which also offers you flexibility, maybe somewhat more in line with the traditional compute infrastructure, and how to deal with containers. Topping it off with how to work with, well, what you can do with tier one cloud. So this has been, ever since this was introduced, this has been a part of the VSC User Day, and it's still a message worth sharing. So tier one web portals, or web portals in general, offer entry-level flexibility in the browser for everyone. If you haven't seen this, please go and check it out. For a lot of users, definitely entry-level users, this is an absolute game changer. So what this is about, this is tied to tier one. It's really easy access to HPC in the browser, so it's no longer looking at 80s levels, black screens with commands. You can point and click stuff. There's no need to have SSH keys, which for some entry-level users is like some weird object that you have no idea what it means. And most of all, you don't need specific local software installations. Just a standard browser like Firefox without any plugins suffices, and that gives you access in the browsers to a file browser, to a job composer, to a terminal in the browser if you're still hooked on that terminal, but also there's interactive applications. This is ideal for GUIs or interactive applications, and popular applications like Jupyter Notebook, RStudio, and even custom applications are possible. This is what it looks like. You can see a screen, and if you click on the interactive applications, you typically get a drop-down menu with a couple of things that might tick your fancy. Just show of hands, who hasn't seen this? Okay, go and check it out. Whether on tier one or on tier two, please do me a favor, check it out. It will probably change your life, if not ours. It definitely is interesting on tier one if you combine this web portal with the debug partition, and briefly wanted to highlight that one. This is, as the name kind of gives it away, it's an interactive debug partition. This is for quick and immediate access, so there's no queue. Really, there's no queue. This is not accounted in credits. And of course, there's a dark side attached to this, because the no queue means something else must be going on. Yes, there's something else going on. You have limited user resources. You can have only max 5 jobs running or waiting in the queue. You have up to 3 running jobs, and you can allocate maximum 8 CPU cores for all running jobs. This is really like to do debugging. Don't do production on this, or we will do dire stuff with you. The hardware is oversubscribed by a factor of 4, and every node has 2 types of GPUs. There is a somewhat more expensive NVIDIA V100 GPU for exclusive access. You have to request this in your job script. This is like working on the GPU nodes, for those of you who know what that means. And there's this Mickey Mouse-like GPU system, NVIDIA Quadro, this is always available to you, but it's a shared system. So it's less powerful, but you can always use it. Choosing this in Tier 1 is simple. You can either pick it in the drop-down menu, for instance, for a cluster desktop application, or you can choose the debug cluster via a module swap command, as you can see at the bottom. So check it out if you haven't. Really life's game changer. Containers. This is also part of the flexibility talk, if you want to call it that. We have been receiving questions on how to use containers, what are containers, can we use them, or what should we do with them? So the somewhat enticing subtitle is Sacrificing Performance for Mobility. And this is broader than Tier 1, so this is basically also highlighting some features on Tier 2. So for those of you, like me, a couple of days ago, don't really know what containers are. Containers are standalone packages of software that you can run in any environment, regardless of the type or vendor of that environment. Common brands for this are Docker, Aptainer, and I'm pretty sure there are a lot of more of them. This sounds nifty, right? So the benefits are it's portable. You can take your stack of applications with you and you can plug it in on every system. It's reproducible because you're pretty sure that everything that works inside your container, you can get it working on another system. You can even create writable containers, so you don't really need the file system in addition, and you can actually stack containers on top of each other. And have containers work with each other basically. Of course, there's a downside, and someone more smarter than me wrote this down. Containers make it easier for scientific researchers to self-manage their software stack and take it with them to whatever compute infrastructure they're working on. This sounds like great things, but most people don't consider that they're often sacrificing performance for mobility. So there is a downside. Potentially, you're losing performance. And this is also a tiny detail. It's if you're using a container that someone else gave you or that you found somewhere on the internet, it's not quite clear what's inside, unless you built it yourself. So please, again, do us a favor. Before considering to use containers on Tier 1 and Tier 2, please bear in mind that container images are typically, but this is in our experience typically, it doesn't mean that's always the case, they can be non-optimized binaries of software. They can work significantly slower than compiled software. If this is for sporadic use, okay. If you're going to do production runs with this, that's not a good idea. Also consider that the VSC Tier 1 and Tier 2 ecosystem supports more than a gazillion number of software modules. They're properly compiled and optimized for the exact hardware on which they want to run. VC staff has spent lots of time and effort in doing this. So again, save yourself and other users some time and try out software modules first, and only then go to containers. Unless, of course, there's a specific reason why you don't want to use the modules. A list of software is available at the bottom, which you can see in the presentation. But anyhow, okay, you came to this point, you checked all those caveats out. How do you go about running containers on a Tier 1 or on a Tier 2 system? You want to use Docker, that's not gonna fly, unfortunately. So Docker does not run on VSC infrastructure because it requires some kind of persistent root privilege, which we're not gonna grant users for, that makes sense. But luckily there's something called Aptainer. It used to be called Singularity, and the term is still out there, hence the dual naming here. These containers are better suited for HPC system because they use something which is called operating system level virtualization. So we can run those containers, that specific type, on the HPC without giving you root permissions. And of course, luckily, Docker is maybe like the most, the most well-known brand of containers. It is definitely possible to convert Docker images to Apptainer images. How to do that, and many examples are available at these two sites. I'm not going to explain that to you because it's dull and dreary. Three caveats. So check your local policies if the Apptainer image can reside on all file systems. This depends on the tier 2 or tier 1 system. Sometimes, for instance, in Ghent, you can only put it on Scratch local disk or a worker node or RAM disk because otherwise it would impact performance. You have to use something called fake root to make Apptainer images or to convert Docker images. And the final one actually dropped off the bottom, and it says, well, if you're using a Docker container from somewhere else, you're not really sure what's inside, so please check, because this is quite important. On to the pinnacle of flexibility, if you want to call it that. So we have tier 1 compute, we have portals which offer you already a lot of flexibility. Check that out. If that flexibility, that's like probably 90% of all people that we've talked to, that's sufficient flexibility already for them. So check it out. But if you want to go one step beyond and you want to do more, this is for you. Tier 1 Cloud, virtual machines with ultimate flexibility for power users. What is the Tier 1 Cloud? It's a platform as a service for power users in a nutshell. So it's infrastructure that can leverage you to deploy resources for scientific and R&D use cases. You can launch virtual machines, have virtual storage systems, and connect private and public networks to it. It's based on industry standard Red Hat OpenStack platform, supported by the UGEN team and Red Hat support, has high availability setup on single site. It's extremely powerful, but it requires effort because you as an end user will be responsible for the installation, the maintenance, and the user management. But as our Sissy colleague just showed, actually, possibly, you might even use some kind of AI tool to help you with that. But nevertheless, it requires, and as Geert-Jan pointed out, you need to have some domain knowledge on what you're doing, because otherwise that AI might feed you something that you don't want, and that also we don't want as managers of that system. Somewhat more gritty details, you can find the majority of stuff also at our website. So it's relatively small, it's only 9 UPS hypervisors, 80 CPU hypervisors, and 9 GPU hypervisors. Some are connected to an interruptible power source. There are GPUs inside. It's a limited number of CPU type cores, but anyhow, a lot of this hardware is virtualized anyhow, so to some extent it's being shared. One very expensive resource is IP addresses. We only grant one public IP address per project because it's really, we quickly would run out otherwise. There are numerous VM images, flavors, and instance types available. A number of very detailed features, so full GPI, PCI device pass-through is possible, so there's no more virtual GPUs, and each virtual machine can attach a full GPU. You can install the latest NVIDIA drivers for your VMs if you want to. And under the hood, we run Ceph. We use Ceph to run the file systems, and of course, we have NVIDIA for the GPUs. This is an interesting one because, again, it ties in with what you said on Ansible. It's not Ansible, but it's Terraform. Terraform is some kind of orchestration, so it's something like infrastructure as code. And Tier 1 Cloud enables this. Again, if this is what you're looking for, this is a very powerful tool. Terraform templates. You can very easily generate complex cloud infrastructure as a user using templates. These templates are in addition compatible with multiple cloud providers, for instance, AWS. So in principle, you can run back and forth. And yeah, this is HashiCorp Terraform. infrastructure as code tool. It's easy to use. It supports, well, maybe not thousands, but a lot of providers, OpenStack, AWS, Azure. It's really what we recommend as a way to deploy cloud infrastructures for new projects. And recently, the VSC staff made a brilliant new documentation. So this one, I'm happy to state, is also included there. Some more details on how to get access. It's a bit similar to the typical cloud, to the typical compute projects. So starting and exploratory projects are continuously open. And it still says here 3 project access calls per year, so typically in February, June, and October. But I can already announce that for cloud and data, as of 2024, we will also make the project calls open continuously. So you don't have to wait for a specific or aim for a specific cutoff. We will just make it open all year. You can submit whenever you want, and a couple of days after that, we will try to evaluate your proposal. Requesting a follow-up project is always possible. This is whether you do it for compute, cloud, or data. And yeah, to give you some idea what have users been doing on the cloud, it's niche, if you want to call it that. As I mentioned, it requires some dedication and some deeper knowledge of what you're doing. So we see it's more concise than the number of compute proposals, for instance. So since 2021, we have 10 pilot projects, 14 starting grants, 20 academic projects, and 3 exploratory industry projects. We see the usage is increasing year over year, but anyhow, it's still limited. But it's useful. And what do users typically do with this? An analysis of the couple of years that we've running, we see 5 major cases. Maybe the coolest one, starting with an example from VUB. You connect a user interface, so web-based interface, to a data analytics tool, so that's a database, which then also does custom calculations for you. So it connects to even a compute tier 1 or tier 2 platform. That's one case that's quite popular, and so that's possible with cloud. Another one is using cloud for web-based data management or processing platform. Some users use this to study the HPC configuration itself, for instance, for optimal AI training. Also popular is just using it as an interactive prototyping environment. Sometimes it requires you to have some kind of lower level infrastructure that is not readily available in the compute infrastructure. And finally, teaching purposes, dedicated VMs for students. And yes, you could also do that with Open OnDemand or a web portal, but sometimes you need lower, again, more tied in with the hardware, and this is what you can go for then. Target audience can be students, can be researchers within the project, so the purpose is provide some ease of use for those researchers involved, or actually a broad audience of researchers. The purpose is like a service delivery, and some cloud projects actually open it up to the world, which is scary, but it happens. And Jan will now continue with Open OnDemand.
So in Open OnDemand, I will repeat a little bit some of the things that Ewald already said in the first part, but we thought it's really that we really want to give it a little bit more attention, because we are really committed in the next year to further evolve in this and further deploy it to the whole VSC. So, but maybe as a starter, Open OnDemand, it's something that's been developed at Ohio University at HPC Center already for 10 years, and it already got some quite substantial funding from the American NSF Foundation. by now, it's already deployed in more than 250 research institutes, so it really has a very broad user base. So it still has funding for the next years. But even if this funding would stop, the mass of users is already quite large to be sure that this is a project that will continue. And we are also very really believe in it, that it's really a very good tool for us. So at the moment, as Ewald showed, it is already available at Tier 1. Also at the Tier 2 in Ghent and at the Tier 2 in Leuven, it's already available. But for next year also, we are also looking for further more deployments also in Antwerp and Brussels. And maybe, oops, wrong button, wrong button, can I go back? Yeah. What it actually, it's your web portal, and the web portal itself will make sure you as a user don't need to install anything. You go just to the correct URL. It will handle your authentication, which is actually based on your VSC account, but you need to go to your institute provider to actually then go through your central ID. And in the back end, in the end, it will set up your own web server process, and within that, you will be able to make access to the cluster. The core of it, most of its functionality is also still coupled with submitting jobs on the cluster in the end. If you're using the resources in the cluster, you will always go through a process of submitting job, but it will be it can be a little bit more hidden for the users, which makes it actually a very good tool for people first working with cluster resources. So, and it's really literally nothing to install. You only need to have your browser. You don't need to have your SSH keys because the authentication is handled differently. And the basic functionality it offers, it gives you a basic tools to do file transfers. You will be also able to monitor jobs that are running on the cluster, and not only submitting things, but also actually see that which jobs are running. It will give you an easy shell access, and also a number of interactive apps that can be made available. Concerning the file access, you will see just within the browser the different locations that you have that are tied to the cluster. You are able to view and edit files. If it's just text files, for instance, or bash scripts, you can edit them directly from within your web browser. You can upload, download files from there as well. You don't need to use FileZilla. It works. We're not advising this to you to do in large file transfers. So there are other tools for this. We also have a Globus available. You can use any other client. You have our sync tools that you may be using. So for very large sync, but for small transfers, loads, easy access, it's available there. Maybe already a peek that in one of the next versions there will be integrations also with Globus. They're working on this, so we're not sure yet how it will look like, but if that's integrated, of course, you will get even more power to do file transfers. And of course, if your data load is really you need a lot of data, specific data workflows, of course, there is Tier 1 data, which is outside of it, but we will be getting a nice example of that in the next presentation. Concerning the job monitoring, you actually can see if your job, what's the state of your job, it's pending, it's running. You can get all information that you would otherwise do from the command line to get some job info. You can easily see it in the browser. There is a delete button next to your job. It means that you actually really can delete, cancel your job, also just from within the browser session. So it's really very, very nice. Apart from this, and you will see all your jobs on the cluster, on the cluster where it's installed. So it's not only the cluster, the jobs that you submitted through OnDemand, but if you have in another interactive shell or something submitted jobs to the cluster, they will also show up here as well. You have also a tool to submit jobs. this is really, we still have a little bit of mixed feeling about this. It gives you some flexibility to do this, but there are still some things that we sometimes think, okay, if you're a little bit experienced, you will write your own scripts and do it a little bit different. But for starters, I think it's a good case, and what also possible, you can create specific job templates, and that could be good for a specific user group if you have the same type of jobs, and then you can easily make one template and make sure that everybody uses this template. And then, of course, if new people comes in the group, it's for them maybe a lot easier to submit new jobs. In that case, it can be actually a good tool to make life easier for you. Concerning shells, there are actually two types of shells that you have. And a shell is just like in a terminal that you have, but it's completely within your browser, so you don't need to install PuTTY, MobaXterm or whatever. It's in the browser itself. And you can have login shell access, and this is very important to know. It's a connection, a terminal on one of the login nodes. So it's a shared environment, and as always on a login node, don't use this to do a lot of compute work, because you will be cancelled, or you will be blocking other users, or you will not be allowed. So, but it's your first login access that's there. But you can also just request an interactive session. It's like submitting an interactive job, and then have a login, a terminal in this interactive job, and then you're actually working on the compute node, and you can do whatever with the resources that you want to do and use them as much as possible. So that's also possible. This is really very useful, I think, if you're doing a course for new master students that haven't been using in a terminal or whatever. So they come there with their laptop. They don't need to install anything. They can immediately log in, and they can immediately have access to the terminal, and you can immediately start with their course. So, and when they can go home, they have still the same tools available for them. So it's really very nice to have it all integrated. Interactive apps, what are interactive apps? That are applications that you normally have some kind of a graphical user interface that are now also handled within the browser. But an interactive app, it also means that you need some compute power, so you will need to request those resources, and that's just the same as submitting a job script, only the resources that you want to specify will be listed in a web form, so it will be very clear what you need to give to actually launch one of the interactive apps. So if you never submitted the job before, it will be, there will be no threshold to actually do this. The job will then go just through the queue. So if you would submit to a queue that's completely full, it will wait until it can start. Depending on how it's organized, if you can, for instance, submit to an interactive session or a debug session where queuing times are very low, that you get immediately your resources, but then of course your resources will be limited. But for some cases you don't need any more. So then you really get your session back very quickly, and you will see the state of the session also in the browser. As soon as it's first starting, but as soon as it started, you will see, okay, it's running, and then there is a button, connect to the session or launch the application, and depending on which application it will be, it will then launch it in the cluster. So there are already a number of client server-based applications like Jupyter Notebook or Jupyter Lab or Studio. These are typically immediately available, and those are also ones that are very widely used. We also have TensorBoard Code Server that's at KU Leuven. Then there are also some desktop applications. Can be that it's a specific program that you want to launch within a desktop application, and typically could be MATLAB, ANSYS, or Abacus, or things like that, if you have the proper licenses, of course. But that's possible. They are some of them are already installed in Ghent at KU Leuven. We're still at looking to deploy some of these. Also a desktop environment. And as said, it can be very, very useful within trainings or workshops. I would say, first of all, if you want to do a training and you want to use, just contact your local support to help setting up things. In Ghent, they also have the possibilities to set up a really specific interactive desktop for us during the time of a session that can be used. In Leuven, we have already used it specifically for Jupyter Notebooks with a specific environment that's used within the training session. So yeah, I think it can be a real great tool. So and what's on schedule next? We will further roll out it within whole VSC. We will be, of course, following the next on-demand releases, and I think the integration of Globus, I'm really curious about that, because Globus is more and more a tool that users start to use to do data transfers. If we can have it integrated in on-demand, I think it can be very useful and user-friendly. And also we will be also looking to the integration of XDMod that can actually give you and show you more informations of the jobs that you have been running in the past. So actually giving you as a user also even access to more information on your jobs in a nice way. So yeah, I think that's all for on-demand. I think if you haven't tried it and you want to see it, it's available. It's also in the documentation. And yeah, we hope to see there a lot of new users coming.